Is TSMC selling chips to China's Huawei? The US is reportedly investigating the Taiwanese chip-making giant.
非常感谢你们，也敬请大家持续努力，发挥我们保家卫国的责任。
Taiwan's president thanks the troops who sprang into action to ward off Chinese military jets and ships. Under pressure in South Africa, the government tells Taiwan to move its representative office. Plus, cashing in on the chips war between the US and China, we report on how Malaysia is positioning itself as a new hub for semiconductor investment. A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Louise Watt. The US is reportedly investigating whether TSMC made advanced chips for China's Huawei, a move that would breach US export rules. TSMC has responded to say it's a law-abiding company and we're committed to complying with all applicable rules and regulations, including applicable export controls. We maintain a robust and comprehensive export system for monitoring and ensuring compliance. The US Commerce Department has not confirmed that it's investigating the Taiwanese chipmaker. Technology publication The Information reports that investigators are looking into whether Huawei bought chips from TSMC indirectly. To learn more about the implications of this, Alec MacDonald spoke to analyst Bob O'Donnell from Tech Analysis Research in Silicon Valley.
The US has reportedly opened an investigation into TSMC for violating export regulations and know your customer regulations by supplying Huawei with AI and smartphone chips. And this also just comes one day after the government announced additional steps to stemming the wave of third-party companies supplying Huawei with these kinds of chips. Can you speak to how big of a problem this is?
Well, you know, the supply chain in the tech industry, Alec, is very, very complicated. It always has been, and it's just getting more so over time. As devices get more sophisticated, they include more components in them. It becomes a huge issue to track all of this down. So, you know, I think the initial efforts by the U.S. Commerce Department were focused on trying to prevent companies who purchase chips from TSMC. And so, because the idea is, you know, the U.S. is concerned, of course, that oftentimes these more advanced chips do end up in military systems as well. And that's what's triggered a lot of this. And so that's why we saw that initial pressure. Now, you know, this takes it even further, as you said, because if TSMC is somehow directly supplying those chips to some of these smaller companies in the supply chain, obviously that's another big issue. And it points to how complicated all of this is today and how difficult it is to keep track of where all these components are going.
So with that in mind, can you speak a little bit to how difficult it is for companies like TSMC to monitor their supply chains?
Well, I mean, you know, you would obviously, everybody would think that they would know who their customers are, but it wouldn't be the first time in the world that we've seen, whether it's in the tech industry or other places, where some company was misrepresenting who they actually were. And it could be that that's the case. And somehow, you know, TSMC was not aware that this is who these companies were and where, in fact, those chips were eventually going. And one thing I will say is over the last couple of years, because of all the concerns about this, actually quite a few of the big computer system manufacturers, companies like Dell and HP and Lenovo and others like that, and I believe Apple as well, they actually have systems in place to now track this because they want to ensure that nothing has been inserted into their devices along the way.
So this also comes just one day after TSMC posted their highest ever quarterly revenue returns. Can you speak a little bit about how big of news this would be for TSMC and then the potential implications and consequences for the wider semiconductor and tech industries at large?
The bottom line is TSMC reports where their chips go in terms of regions, and China is still much smaller than the US. So it would be, in terms of the impact to TSMC directly, it might be modest. It's more of a political issue in terms of what they're going to have to do to avoid these kind of concerns being raised in the future. Look, the reality is TSMC is sort of in the commanding position right now because all the most advanced, well, not all, the vast majority of the most advanced chips in the world are coming from TSMC. So companies in the US are utterly dependent upon them. I think it's certainly going to raise some red flags, especially when you've got the US government giving funding and incentives to TSMC to, for example, build a factory in Arizona. So it's a very sticky problem if it turns out, there's some things going on here. But my guess is, TSMC has had a pretty good record of trying to keep clean and away from politically driven issues. It may simply be a case where some of these companies, again, misrepresented themselves to TSMC, and now it's being discovered and actions will be taken right away.
That was Bob O'Donnell, Chief Analyst at Tech Analysis Research in Silicon Valley. President Lai Ching-te has praised Taiwan's military for their response to Chinese military drills. Lai visited Air Force, Navy and Coast Guard bases to offer his thanks. Rick Lauert reports.
It's been a busy week for Taiwan's military, facing up to large-scale Chinese military drills in areas surrounding the country. Taiwan's President Lai Ching-te is visiting this Navy base for mobile anti-ship missile launchers in northern Taiwan to thank troops for their response. More than 150 Chinese military planes took part in Monday's war games, and 25 Navy and Coast Guard boats came close to Taiwan's contiguous zone. Beijing said they were a warning against those seeking independence for a country it says is part of its sovereign territory. Lai put his military on high alert. They held positions at sea and in the air, and mobile missile system teams like this were deployed. Visiting divisions called to action this week, Lai also thanked the country's Air Combat Command Center, responsible for scrambling jets to ward off Chinese incursions.
中国的演习我们大家都全神戒备，全力以赴表现都非常的杰出非常感谢你们，也敬请大家持续努力发挥我们保家卫国的责任。
Throughout the week, Lai has had one message for his country, that his government will stand up against provocative actions from China and defend a free and democratic Taiwan. Today, he's showing his support for those that are on the front line of that battle. Ryan Wu and Rick Lauert in Taoyuan for TaiwanPlus.
The government is facing more pressure abroad as South Africa demands Taiwan move its representative office out of its administrative capital, Pretoria. It's a move observers say shows China's growing influence. John Van Trieste reports on Taipei's latest diplomatic rifts.
It's a diplomatic blow. South Africa says Taiwan's representatives in the country are no longer welcome in administrative capital Pretoria. They'll have to move to the country's largest city, Johannesburg. It's only 50 kilometers away, but in diplomatic terms, this is a banishment. Diplomats and foreign policy experts say China, which claims Taiwan, is behind the decision. Though most countries have cut formal ties with Taiwan, China is still irritated by the network of representative offices Taiwan uses to keep up informal ties with countries like South Africa.
这是南非要求我们撤款，1000%的是中国大陆在幕后怂恿的。这南非为什么那么的斩钉截铁，态度那么的强硬？当然也跟这个中国给他承诺一些协助一些这个援助也不无关系。
北京还是非常善用了他手中对台湾施压的工具箱，包括像军事或者像政治外交，以及像是经贸这个领域里面，它可以对台施用的工具。
And China is especially strong in Africa, where only the Kingdom of Eswatini maintains formal diplomatic ties with Taiwan. In 2017, another African country, Nigeria, also expelled the local Taiwan office from its capital. Taiwan may retaliate for this latest slight.
目前外交部仍持续进行最大努力，但如果南非政府最终仍然执意屈从中国、改变现状、伤害台菲两国情谊，外交部也将基于对等原则，研拟所有可能的对应方案。
Possible measures include making South Africa's office in Taiwan leave Taipei, stricter visa inspections for South Africans, cutting education exchanges temporarily, or scaling back the number of South Africans allowed to teach English in Taiwan, now around 5,000. But South Africa isn't the only place where Taiwan's diplomacy faces pressure. China has also warned India to be careful about its approach to Taiwan, after Taiwan opened an office in Mumbai, its third in India. With China constantly at work to undermine them, Taiwan's diplomats continue to face an extra layer of challenges when representing the country. Fu Huahong and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
Former President Tsai Ing-wen has arrived in Brussels as part of her first international trip since leaving office. Speaking at an event with EU leaders, Tsai said she will continue to advocate for freedom and democracy internationally. Tsai arrived in the home of the EU government after visiting Prague and Paris. She's also expected to visit the US in the coming weeks. The Malaysian state of Penang is gearing up to move up the semiconductor industry supply chain. The country has become a strategic destination for tech investment as companies shift south. Tiffany Wong reports.
Okay, so this is the testing table.
Customizing industrial computers for buyers in the ASEAN region. These engineers at Taiwanese computer maker Advantech are showing off their latest orders, now produced in the company's newest service center in Penang, Malaysia. It's followed its customers there, many of whom now prefer to do business in the region so as not to be overly reliant on China, where the risks of trade barriers or supply chain disruptions are greater and labor costs are rising. Among Southeast Asian nations, Malaysia has emerged as an attractive option for Advantech.
It's also considerable the advantage in Malaysia, like for example, multiple ratio, like the good education, good talent, good English capability, and so on. So consider all the factors, so we invest in the Penang to build up, become a shared service center cover in the all ASEAN region.
And many multinational companies agree. In 2023, Penang attracted a record $12.8 billion in foreign direct investment, garnering more than the combined total of the previous decade.
This is Bayan Lepas Science Park, the first free trade zone in Malaysia. It opened in the 1970s and has since become home to big names like Intel, AMD, and HP, companies which have helped Penang become known as the Silicon Valley of the East. Now, some of these long-term investors like Intel, which has been here over 50 years, are still continuing to develop in this area.
Since then, Penang has become a leader in the lower end of the value chain for tech like semiconductors, and its established government incentives and infrastructure have made it a top destination for investors.
The infrastructure in Penang has evolved dramatically. Even right now, the government has been putting in a lot of effort to improve the infrastructure in Penang, including the upcoming rail links to Penang and the investment in electricity infrastructure.
In May, the government launched its national semiconductor strategy, aiming to move up the value chain and strengthen talent retention. But analysts warn this could take years. For now, the state's investment agency is diversifying beyond semiconductors to boost production and balance the economy.
We brought in the medtech industries, we brought in the food industries, because these industries are not so cyclical, and we hope that while the semiconductor cycles happen to be low, these other industries will be able to buffer that shocks.
As Penang looks to benefit from shifting trends in chipmaking, it's attracting growing interest from Taiwanese companies like Advantech. And with this momentum, Penang hopes to solidify its place as the resilient Silicon Valley of the East and reshape the global semiconductor supply chain. Patrick Chen and Tiffany Wong in Penang, Malaysia for TaiwanPlus.
And you can watch the whole of the new Southbound series on our website, TaiwanPlus.com. Coming up, Taipei Fashion Week kicks off with a blend of playful art and high fashion. Stay tuned.
This month's top hits on TaiwanPlus. Traditional Chinese medicine has long been a mystery.
经络现象是一种生命现象，生命消失就不会有经络的现象。
Witness a new era as ancient healing embraces the future.
As a kid, I thought about living in a big city.
When I came to Taiwan, it was a real eye-opener.
Why do many expats view Taiwan as home?
It's just a magical place. I don't know how else to put it.
Dive into touching stories of how they interact with local culture. Mandarin learning can be intriguingly fun.
Fire is 火.
Join us on a journey to explore how Mandarin radicals connect with everyday life. Calling all campers and dog lovers. A tail-wagging and breathtaking adventure is on its way. Vibrant and original programs exclusively on TaiwanPlus.
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. Israel's military has killed Hamas's top leader inside the Gaza Strip. Yahya Sinwar topped Israel's most wanted list for over a year, seen as the mastermind behind a deadly attack on the country that sparked the latest war. As Rosie Greninger reports, his death is bringing hope for an end to the violence.
Celebrations in the streets of Sderot, a southern Israeli town bordering Gaza, after their government confirmed the death of Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar. The Israeli military released drone footage of Sinwar's body found in a house in southern Gaza after a ground operation targeting other Hamas militants.
אנחנו סוגרים חשבון עם סינואר שאחראי ליום המאוד מאוד קשה הזה שהיה לנו לפני שנה.
Sinwar had topped Israel's most wanted list, seen as the mastermind of the October 7th attacks that triggered the Israel-Hamas war that has raged on for over a year, claiming the lives of more than 41,000 people in Gaza. His death is a crippling blow to Hamas, with its leadership ranks and fighting forces greatly reduced. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu appealed to the people in Gaza, saying this could be the end of the war if Hamas surrenders and all the hostages they took last October are returned.
This war can end tomorrow. It can end if Hamas lays down its arms and returns our hostages. Hamas is holding 101 hostages in Gaza, who are citizens of 23 countries.
And until Israel gets the outcome it wants, its troops have been ordered to continue its operations in Gaza. International leaders have called Sinwar's death a turning point in the conflict. US President Joe Biden saying it was a good day for the world and emphasised the importance of ending the war.
Now's the time to move on. Move toward a ceasefire in Gaza. Make sure that we move in the direction that we're going to be in a position to make things better for the whole world. It's time for this war to end and bring these hostages home.
A call echoed by the families of Israeli hostages.
It is critical that all attention is focused now on achieving the goal of the deal, which will secure the release of our son Omer and the rest of the hostages.
It's unclear if Hamas will lay down arms and seek a deal with Israel. The group is yet to comment on their leader's death. But security analysts believe with Sinwar, a staunch opposer to releasing the hostages, removed from the negotiation table, a deal could now be possible.
Many are hopeful that with Sinwar out of the way, new leadership is going to want to find a way to end this conflict, and that means releasing the hostages potentially in exchange for an end to the war. So it will depend on who rises in place of Sinwar. And then, of course, on the Israeli side, this isn't a sure bet either.
Many world leaders have called for a two-state solution with a reformed Palestinian Authority to create lasting peace in the Middle East, an idea Israel does not support. But with pressure to end the war increasing on Israel, from both within and outside the country, Sinwar's death has brought the region the closest it's been to a ceasefire in a year. James Lien and Rosie Greninger for TaiwanPlus.
China's economy grew 4.6% in the last 3 months, the slowest growth since early 2023. While the figure slightly beat forecasts, it was slower than the previous quarter. The world's second largest economy is struggling with a declining property sector and slowing export growth. Policymakers last month unveiled monetary support measures in a bid to boost the economy, as Beijing tries to hit its target of 5% GDP growth. Tens of thousands of sea nomads in Malaysia are facing greater barriers to citizenship after a change in the law. And they've already been facing evictions as part of a crackdown on cross-border crime. Gino Lopez reports.
In these pristine waters of Sabah, Malaysia, lie the wreckage of a community forced to flee by the authorities. These patches of wood, all that's left of the stilt homes of hundreds of sea nomads, now living in limbo after what authorities say was a crackdown on cross-border crime. The Bajau Laut are an indigenous seaborne community that have lived between eastern Sabah and the southern Philippines for centuries. Known for being able to dive underwater for long periods of time, they rely heavily on the sea for sustenance. But because of their nomadic lifestyle, the Bajau Laut are considered by Malaysia as migrants, so they don't automatically get citizenship or even resident status. Without such papers, many in the community live in poverty, with little access to education, healthcare, or financial services.
Palsu. Walaupun aku mau jadi inilah, mau jadi itulah, mau jadi polis lah, mau jadi askar lah kan. Tapi itu tuh tidak tercapai disebabkan tidak ada dokumen, tidak ada sijil lahir, tidak ada IC kan.
Legal recognition would help people like the Bajau Laut access state services, education, and land formal jobs. But for them, the path to Malaysian citizenship isn't an easy one. For many in the community, the demolition of their homes last June serve as a grim reminder of how unwelcome they are. And now, their situation could only get worse, as the Malaysian government will be reducing the window for stateless people like the Bajau Laut to apply for citizenship. A process that already takes years to accomplish and requires a birth certificate, something most Bajau Laut don't have. It has also lowered the age limit for applicants from 21 to 18 years old. And further, children of one stateless parent and one Malaysian citizen or permanent resident will no longer automatically be given citizenship. Human rights activists have denounced the amendments as regressive and are demanding the government compensate by providing basic needs.
So what we are actually looking at is at least allow them to go to school and at least give them a working permit so that they can earn money. And by giving them education and working permit, we can at least, take them out from poverty.
The Malaysian government says they are doing all they can to help the Bajau Laut and will resettle the community to another coastal area in Sabah. But as forced evictions continue and citizenship now seemingly further out of reach, Malaysia's Bajau Laut are uncertain about their future, and they'll likely remain so until a concrete systemic change is made. Joseph Wu and Gino Lopez for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan's biggest fashion event of the year has kicked off in Taipei. Sandy Chi was there for the opening.
A mix of cutesy art and high fashion graced the runway on the opening night of Taipei Fashion Week, the country's biggest fashion event. The show features designs from pairings of 6 fashion designers and 6 professional digital illustrators. It's a groundbreaking collaboration, marking the first time these two worlds have merged in Taiwan. Bringing this collaboration to life wasn't easy. For Berlin-based Taiwanese streetwork designer #Demore, blending their edgy catalog with colorful illustrated creations posed a unique challenge.
In the beginning, for our team, we think, oh my God, this IP is just way too cute, and we are like a very, edgy and very cool, very Berlin style. But I think this is always a fun part, I think the cooperation is always about looking for the spark, looking for a conversation, looking for the conflict. In order to have a conflict, then we can actually transfer something new.
因为这是我第一次跟时装做合作，所以觉得非常有趣。因为我本身也很喜欢设计服装这一块，就很开心，就是没有想到自己的作品可以用这种方式呈现。
This collaboration aims to make high fashion more accessible to young people by combining colorful characters with modern looks. The end result seems to have impressed audiences.
What I was getting was, it was really out of the box and super creative. And there are a few pieces that I did not expect it. Like, I did not expect it would look like that. And it actually looks good on, you know, just wear it like that. And then it was really fun.
It's a little bit controversial to the eyes because you're not used to it. And makes everything so lively. It's kind of weird, but in a good way. It's like quirky.
In addition to the designs on the runway, a special guest stole the spotlight on opening night: Olympic gold medalist Lien. This year, Taipei Fashion Week invited the boxer to kick off the show, symbolizing strength and grace.
这一次能够以就是非常台湾特色的方式、风格、文化，可以去展现出台湾的文化跟力量的一种拍摄模式，我觉得是非常新鲜的体验。我觉得能够用这样的方式去介绍台湾，哇，我是相当的与有荣焉。
Though the opening event only lasted for a few hours, Taipei Fashion Week will continue until the end of October, offering creativity, culture, and innovation alongside the latest fashion trends. Tsai and Sunny Chi for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching TaiwanPlus News. You can visit the TaiwanPlus website or follow our social media for more stories. Finally today, we'll play out with some more designs from Taipei Fashion Week, including outfits made from recycled denim. I'm Louise Watt. Take care. We'll see you next time.